I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
So this is just an absolutely insane take on freedom of speech by Tim Walz, who is Kamala Harris's vice president and will be in power for 4 to 8 years if they win, which is absolutely insane. Because what he wants to do is he wants to limit freedom of speech to whatever the government dictates is acceptable or unacceptable. So the government can cast out these vague, arbitrary definitions of whatever hate speech is or misinformation. It's like, what do you deem misinformation? Who's deciding that? Who's deciding what's true and what's not? The government? So if you question what the government says is true, you're immediately going to go to prison. That sounds like an authoritarian government. That sounds like the kind of thing that happens in Russia or China, or now the UK, which is probably even more authoritarian than both those put together. That's where we're headed, is we're headed to, if you say anything bad about any protected class of people, immediately to prison because you're inciting racial violence and hate speech. And this is just absolutely insane. So he's saying freedom of speech protects you unless we don't like what you say, basically. If you say anything we do not like, you don't have the freedom of speech to say it. So you don't have freedom of speech. They're going to eat away at that, and then you can't question any of the government's actions. Any question of the government's action is inciting a revolution or a coup or whatever they want to say, that's going to basically make it illegal to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't like this, or I don't want to vote for this candidate, or this person said this thing in the past, which is questionable. You know, anything that they determine is hateful against any government employee or sitting president or the election process or anything, straight to prison. And that may sound extreme. Like you may say, oh, well, you're taking it to a logical extreme. Well, yeah, of course I am. If you have a system that has the capability of being taken to an extreme, you should be concerned about that system. What freedom of speech does is it draws a hard line that says you are allowed freedom of speech. You can say things that question the government. You can say hurtful, hateful things about other people. Because as soon as the government, whoever's in charge for that 4-year period of time, can determine what's true and what's not, then you have huge, huge problems. And there's no coming back from that. So you have to look at this as a logical extreme. Like the government will turn into every other dictatorial authoritarian government throughout human history and just limit what you're able to say and cast unspeakable punishment on you if you say things they don't like. And then, of course, they'll use this to eat away at all the other amendments. The Second Amendment, they'll say, well, you can't question the government's ability to take guns away from the citizens, and then you'll all be rounded up. So it starts with freedom of speech where you're able to communicate freely. Look at what has been done this year, just thanks to Elon Musk buying X. That freedom of speech has been able to reign. All these agendas that they've tried to kick up again, the monkeypox thing, that was shut out really quickly. All the mainstream media's attention for the Trump assassination attempt, when they said, oh, Trump fell, or loud noise heard at Trump rally. And then people on X are like, he was shot in the head. Like, share the real information. And so the mainstream media is terrified. Tim Walz is terrified that the mainstream media is losing control. And so if the mainstream media loses trust and credibility, a voluntary exposure experience, right? You're voluntarily watching that propaganda. If that doesn't work anymore, the voluntary, you go to the mandatory, which is the government says, you can't say this, you can't believe this, you can't spread it, you can't share it. You will actually be imprisoned if you say anything we don't like. The mandatory limiting of speech. Like you can only get the government mandated propaganda, which is just insane. Like freedom of speech is the core tenet of the Western civilization in general. There's a reason it's the First Amendment. It's the most important. It protects everything else. It's the foundation of our ability to create a free society. You can't have a free society without free speech, and Tim Walz wants to limit that. So combine Tim Walz's absolutely insane policy here with Kamala Harris's communistic economic plans. I mean, you're looking at one of the most brutal authoritarian governments that will ever exist, because not only will they get in and their ideas have already been tried and led to the massacre of millions and tens of millions of people, what they're going to do is they're going to have the ability to be even more severe with it. Like look at the United Kingdom, where they're setting up facial recognition cameras everywhere, or China that has the social credit score system. This is the kind of thing they're going to implement here. Like, it's going to be as brutally authoritarian as any government throughout history, except for they're going to have even more capacity to oppress you physically, mentally. It's going to be insane. And so they can't win. I mean, this is crazy talk. Like, the total death and collapse of America within 4 years. America literally will not last 4 years under Kamala Harris. Like, people always say that, but when you're talking about destroying the economy and limiting people's speech and rounding them up, I mean, look at what's happening in England, who's like 10 years ahead of us politically. They're on the brink of a civil war, and it's going to be a nasty, nasty war if it comes to pass, because the people are just enraged at their government. Because you say anything questioning any protected class and you get rounded up. You know, they kick down your door and they drag you off for saying, you know, I love being native British. It's like, wow, that's insulting to people who aren't native British. So you're going to get sent to a camp. It's absolutely insane over there. And that's where we're headed. And so Kamala Harris is going to destroy the economy. When you look at like the whole unrealized gain taxation, if that were to pass, everybody's just going to pull their money out of the stock market. And then the whole stock market will crash and never recover, because no one will put money in it if it's going to be taxed like that. Taxed on money you don't have, having to sell off assets that have not come to fruition to pay taxes on money you have not made yet. That's insane. So the total like grabbing of governmental power, just taking away any rights or freedom from the people, will end in the total collapse of America, because America is still like half and half. Like, there is a large conservative population that would be totally find these policies totally unacceptable, and it would break along probably state lines. Florida, Texas, other states would just leave and say, we're not going to live under this. This is absolute insanity. But unfortunately, a lot of the policies that Kamala Harris wants to put in place, like the stock market, literally crashing the stock market with no survivors, that's going to affect the entire country. You can't just leave politically and say, well, we're in the independent state of Florida and we're not going to accept the freedom of speech regulations that the federal government has put in place. We will not enforce those. We will actively arrest any federal agents that try to enforce those in Florida. That's fine. That can happen. But the economic policies that this horribly monstrous campaign wants to put in place is going to destroy the entire country. And there's no separating the states out from that. Not for a long time, right? Not before everybody's standing in bread lines or starving to death in the streets. This is just, I basically I'm having a hard time even articulating how insane this would be, like how fast this transition would be. I mean, look at COVID and what they wanted to do with COVID. Like, look at COVID in other countries like Australia or England, and that's where we're headed. And imagine the policies of Australia during COVID with the full force of the U.S. government. That's a nightmare. That's an absolute nightmare to come to pass. And that's exactly what's going to happen, is they will immediately lock everybody down. Anybody who questions the government is going to get sent off to some camp. You're not even going to have rights, right? You look at the January 6ers and they treated them like literal terrorists. And they're going to say anybody who questions the government is a literal terrorist. They do not have rights. They do not have the right to a free and fair trial. Yeah, that's what's going to happen, is just total dehumanization of any American citizen, any American ideal. And I'm not trying to exaggerate here. I'm really saying, like, this is what, because you can look ahead, look at Canada, look at Australia, look at England, Western countries, former British colonies, like the same as us, culturally, near identical, and where they're at right now because they've implemented these kind of policies and where they're headed. Even this week, Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is talking about is flooding the place with immigrants and shutting down even more speech and creating like organizations to hunt people online who dare question the government and question these policies, spreading misinformation and hate speech, whoever deems misinformation to be true or not, or whatever that is. And I mean, the whole point of American democracy, like the American ideal, is to have discourse, and having discourse, you can have different opinions that neither of you can be right, or you could both be right in part. But now it's like you can't have any discourse. If you are deemed wrong by the government, even if your opinion holds any sort of weight, it's still, you're wrong, and you're going to go to prison for it. It's just absolute insanity. So I can't believe he's brazenly saying he's going to do this. This whole line of protect our sacred democracy, which is literally just a system. It's a system for voting. It's not sacred. They try to elevate it, both the left and the right try to elevate it to this holy theistic thing, like this, like God's gift to the world is democracy. It's like, guys, it's literally a popularity contest. Take your high school popularity contest for like class clown or whatever and upgrade it to a country scale. That's literally all it is. It is people cast a vote, most popular guy wins. It's a system. It's a process. It is not deified. It is not sacred. And then the fact that it's like we have to become fully authoritarian in order to protect our sacred democracy is absolutely insane. It's the whole logic there is crazy. Obviously, we know it's not genuine. They don't actually believe in democracy. It's just democracy, misinformation, hate speech, all these like thrown out terms. It's like, oh, this stuff is so bad. You know, we got to protect against it. We got to protect you from yourself. How dare you try to inform yourself? How dare you try to have an opinion that we deem is bad for you? And therefore, the consequences of that will be severe. So I don't know. This is just a disgrace. It's disgusting. I don't know what you want to say about it, really. That hasn't already been said. And thankfully, we have freedom of speech, and we have organizations like Twitter, Telegram, Rumble to talk about these things before the government has the ability to round you up for saying it. So spread this stuff before these policies get in place, before Kamala and Walz can get into office and literally destroy this country, like speed run any percent. And hopefully we can prevent this from happening. But this is literally going to be the most critical election in American history. Absolutely. I mean, we're looking at the preservation of American ideals versus the total destruction of it. And if you want a different country, like, you can, but it's not going to be America. Like, if you vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, this is not going to be America anymore. It's going to be a completely different country, completely different ideals, completely different basis of religion, belief, morality, economic system. This is not going to be America. And then to believe that you can remove the basis of the entire society, those important key factors, and expect it to have the same result is mind-boggling that people believe that it would still be the same country. And no matter what you do to America, like, no matter how hard you hit it with a hammer, no matter how much you want to destroy it, like, whatever you do to it, it's invincible, it's invulnerable. Nothing will ever happen to it. Like, no matter how much abuse it takes, it's totally impervious to any sort of decline. That's just crazy line of logic. Like, people are so, like, they're gaslighting themselves if they believe that America cannot fall like every other empire throughout history. If they think that's not the case, they're just ignorant. There's no real explanation besides that. Like, you think you're perfect. You think you're like, the pride is just immense, thinking that you're invulnerable. America's invulnerable to any sort of like economic collapse, any sort of social collapse, thinking that we can just remove parts of the system however we want and everything will work out fine. Crazy. So I appreciate you watching. Thanks for listening to me rant about this, and we'll see how this goes forward. But I mean, every time they come out, it's just a worse and worse policy every single week, and we're very close to the election. So stay tuned. I'm going to report on this stuff more. I will see what else they have to say and see what the Trump campaign does in response to these sort of policies that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz wants to put in place. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I'll catch you in the next one.